everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of LeadHERShip Bytes podcast, where we share the inspiring and empowering stories of current and emerging women leaders across diverse career stages, industries, and backgrounds. Today, we are welcoming Velma Hart, the Chief Operating Officer of the Construction Specifications Institute and the CSI Foundation. Her achievements are many. Velma is a fellow of the American Society of Association Executives and a certified association executive. She has also served as a past board chair of ASAE. Velma has vast experience, not just with associations, but also other types of nonprofits as well. She is a veteran of the U.S. Army Reserves, a former secretarial appointee to the Advisory Committee on Women Veterans for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and she has been a commentator for CNBC and MSNBC and has published on issues ranging from finance to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am so pleased to have the opportunity to share Ms. Velma Hart, her experience, and her wisdom with this audience today. Velma, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to a riveting discussion.
So let's get started with having you tell us about your leadership journey and how you came to your current role as COO of a trade association.
So that's a great question. And you start with the end in mind. So I always told my girls, I have two daughters, that you're always being watched. And they taught me that because as infants, as toddlers, I would see them in the back seat watching me all the time. And I'd say, "What are you looking at?" And they say, "I don't know." And they were learning in those moments. So how I got my start is I didn't realize I was being watched. I didn't realize there were people who were taking note of how I did what I did, my professionalism, my lack of professionalism, because we all start out and there's a little growth needed. I just didn't know who was watching. And people saw me and started talking to me about what my future plans were, what my future goals were. And I started telling them I want to run the world. And that was my ambition. So funny. As an African American woman, white men were my entry into leadership because they saw me. They weren't threatened by me. They didn't feel any fear. And so they elevated me in spaces where I couldn't have gone without them. And it's sad to say that, but that was the reality when I was coming through. Now, as I tell our DELP scholars, it is their responsibility to raise each other up. We don't have to have any other nationality raise us up. We can raise each other up. And so that's how I got my start. I was just seen when I didn't think anybody was watching.
Thank you for sharing that because I think it does also speak to the power of allyship and what it could do. So for those who are listening who are not part of an underrepresented group, know that you can make a difference in people's lives. You have so much experience leading nonprofit organizations, both operations and people. Can you share some of the biggest challenges that you have faced and your approach to overcoming those challenges?
Well, I'm going to start with your second question. I would say appreciating the differences. That is the greatest challenges. The greatest challenge, I mean. We have 5 active generations in the workforce that are completely different in how they approach the work and what their values are. And that makes it tough when you're managing people to outcomes. So you've got to find what ignites them, what inspires them, what can bring them together as an effective team first. You don't start with the assignment first. You start with the people because they are the conduit to success. Every day of the year, no matter what the industry, you have to have great people inspired to do great things. And so my approach was to always assess my team, understand them. I needed to know what made them tick. And so I invested in those early days in getting to know them and revealing myself, that humility and being authentic with people, getting them to know my ticks and quirks and finding out about theirs. And through the collegial operation, we get to success. And it wasn't always easy. And there are always bumps in the road done right. But if you invest in people and you understand them, you suss out the wrong ones and you elevate the right ones.
And how much of your military background do you attribute to your success in leadership?
I'm not sure that I would necessarily attribute the military background per se, but the discipline and the stick-to-itiveness that you learn in the military to get the job done has helped me. It's fostered a commitment to excellence, I believe. My military service is one of my greatest experiences, and to this day, there's a lot of camaraderie between my circle and I. So I value that. But I do think the discipline that I have exacted in my career came through or from my military experience.
That's awesome. You've gotten a lot of experience working with people. You've been in the military, you worked in nonprofit. You've done so much, right? And I'm just curious what you think about where we are in nonprofits right now. An organization called the Building Movement Project did a report called Race to Lead. And what they found was that there were a lot of nonprofit workers who were choosing or saying that they would in the future go into other industries. And I'm just really curious of what you think about how current leaders and emerging leaders can help regenerate interest in nonprofits and associations and really build our workforce and move it forward.
Yeah, another great question. My inner self tells us that the evolution of the business model, bringing business into the nonprofit thinking is absolutely the right thing to do. But I fear that what has happened over time is we've made our mission as nonprofits just jobs. So we treat them as 9 to 5 ambition rather than the missions that all nonprofits have. I pride myself that I've never worked for an industry that I didn't have complete commitment and passion for. I think that it feels like we're more self-serving than we've ever been as an industry. And that's not what being a nonprofit is all about, right? It's about serving others, serving a profession. It feels very selfish right now. And I'm hoping that we will evolve past that. I'm not sure what the trigger was. I don't think the current political climate helps it at all. But I think we've got to get back to the basics. The mission of our organizations, the people and the industries we serve should be the leading driver for everything that we do, right? From the receptionist or the mailroom clerk, all the way up to the CEO. It's got to be about the mission. And when we lose that focus, organizations feel like they're in a spin to me. And I know a lot of organizations are in a spin.
How do leaders get that focus back to the mission if they've lost it?
So we talk a lot about culture, and a lot of leaders in this field don't realize their own responsibility for organizational culture. The organization values what the leader values. If the leader values shiny things and not being welded to the mission, then the organizational culture will lead others to believe that those aren't important and they will mimic the behavior. And so the leader of the organization has to realize their responsibility to culture and embrace it. They also have to get away from delegating human management. Let me say it differently. Who completes the evaluation can be something other than the CEO. But the CEO ought to know everyone's name, and they ought to have the respect for everyone, because without that call, the will wouldn't be complete to engage at every level of the organization. They should do their best to stomp out fear if it exists in any form within the organization because you don't get the bright ideas. So I think it emanates from the organizational culture and the CEO realizing the value of their footprint on that organizational culture and their responsibility to protect it. But I don't see that. I see a lot of people talking about how much money they make and what car they drive. And that's a different conversation than when I was coming up.
You mentioned fear and CEOs' responsibilities to move organizations past that. There are lots of things that drive a culture of fear. And I am curious, how have you addressed it and stamped that out so that people do feel more secure?
I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't understand, and you don't have to have a human resources degree to understand, but we don't value and appreciate that we need to engage our humans around a common theme. And I'm at a loss um, to think about. what you can do or what you need to do to improve that outcome. And I'm getting lost in my head because this is such a critically important theme that we've got to get this down. What do we do to shape? Okay, so let's start with a few common assets. I tell my staffs, and I'm also the CEO of Velma Hart Associates, and so I work with corporations or nonprofits to stamp out organizational dysfunction. So I tell them, if you see something, say something. And I follow the airline motto that you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help someone. So if you aren't complete, if you don't know where you're going, then you've got to fix that before you can help anybody else. And so I think one of the critical things is to call out fearful acts in the moment that it happens. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, but to call it out when you see it and without fear of reprisal. And so I think that is the fundamental answer to your question, but that's what's happening because people need a paycheck or they are fearful of retaliation in other forms. And so I think the fundamental answer to what you ask is you've got when you see fearful acts or a climate of fear being created, you've got to call it out. But it's not easy. And it takes a courageous soul to do that, who is fully invested and knows that there could be unintended consequences for calling that out, but is so committed to changing that climate of fear that they're willing to take the risk. Nothing gets fixed, even in the hospital, unless you talk about it. And so if you're not willing to give voice to what's wrong, it can't be addressed. And so even fear has to be approached in that manner.
That's so good. So good. Y'all, if y'all can see my face over here, this is rich. Okay. Let me tell you. I love that you lift that courageous spirit because I hear tell that you are a pioneering spirit who conceptualized and got the necessary organizational support and buy-in to launch the Diversity Executive Leadership Program at the American Society of Association Executives, which has become a banner program for the organization, turning out more than 240 diverse executive scholars, some of whom are now leading associations, many of whom are certified association executives, and the list of credentials goes on. So I'd love to tap into what your thought process and your motivation was. How did it all evolve? Take us back.
Well, there was a band of people who helped to create the DELP program. I was just a noisy wheel. And sometimes noisy wheels, get attention. But I think about Larry Alexander, who was so committed to this out of Detroit and
Yeah.
Detroit CBB. Without him, it actually could never have happened. Or Mary Lou Murata, who we lost, really were the catalyst to getting that started. I was a bit player as well as others in the process, but much respect. And as you know, all the Delpers are my babies, and I encourage them. You only get a chance to make a difference if you're at the table. It doesn't matter what your title is, you need to be at the table. So, it started out innocently, like many projects do. I was walking into the rooms where I and another leader, John Crump, used to be the only ones. And we used to lock eyes from across the room and say, why is this room so lily white? What are we doing here? And I said to Mike Olson, where are the other people of color in this room? And I was still in my 30s then. He was the then CEO. And he said, well, Velma, if you want to do something about it and you believe there's a community that is underrepresented, help us change that. And so he gave me the courage to speak, courage being the commonality, the courage to speak about the need for diversity in the room. And it was initially met with a lot of resistance, but we stayed to it. We created a business case that diversity was necessary, especially in ASAE, because of the penetration and influence an association have in the world. And by the time John Graham came aboard, he loved that idea. And I think there was a part of him that saw the business imperative of this. and the potential to bring additional eyeballs and additional wallets to ASAE. And he galvanized around this and used me in many ways to advance the narrative, because coming out of his mouth, it would sound different than coming out of my mouth about the need for this and the importance of it. And there were a cast of characters. If I named one, I'd forget another. So, I don't want to name any names, but there were a band of very passionate people about the importance of DE&I, not just in terms of color, but in terms of experience and background, and where you come from, and whatever makes you different, because only a handful of the things that make us different can we truly see on the outside. Most of what makes us different comes from the inside. So I just think it was a sweet walk, and we selected the right DELP scholars. And now, like you said, they're leading the industry. They're absolutely leaders in the industry. From Sean Boyens, who leads ASAE, to, my God, again, if I started naming, I'd leave someone off. So I'm just proud of all my DELPers. And they're rocking and rolling and changing the world, having the type of impact that I could only hope they would have had 20 years ago. They are writing the rules, and that's where we make the difference at the table.
When I started in the DELP program, when I was accepted, I was still a manager. I was lucky enough to be working for someone who was a DELP scholar, and she encouraged me to apply. So those of you who are working in associations and you are in underrepresented groups, I would encourage you, if you have not heard of ASAE's DELP program, to look into it. Go to asaecenter.org. It is a life-changing experience.
The application window is about to open, so that's very importantly. You can talk to people who look like you and your shared values, and get courage and grow in that. And that is what that program is all about. And because of that, people are evolving. They're reaching heights that they didn't see 5 years before they applied. Because, even the peer pressure among that group it's real.
That is very true. That is a group of high achievers for sure.
High achievers.
Yes. So thank you for being one of the pioneers there. It speaks to your legacy, and it has been a life-changing experience, I know, for so many of us. So thank you for that. And just curious, Velma, about what advice you would offer to aspiring women leaders who are looking to advance their careers. Maybe they are not in leadership roles right now, but they want to get there. Where should they start?
I'm going to go back to that airline announcement. You can't assist anyone unless you put on your own oxygen mask first. So you got to be whole, not complete. I said whole with yourself and where you're going before you can really step out. Because what I see is, absent that, there are fits and starts. And fits and starts are discouraging, because they make you believe, even if it's not true, that there's something wrong with you. And so you got to be in it for the ride before you start to drive. You know what I mean? If you understand that analogy. So I would say, chart your path. A flow chart. My background is in finance, and so I do a lot of math analogies. But a flow chart can be modified. It's just a graph to tell you where you're going, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's not written in stone. It's written with pencil and paper, with an eraser. So all you have to do is erase a line and draw a new one. So I think start there, get the help you need. So if you need to talk to a therapist, for example, a lot of African-American women, people of color, believe that therapy is bad. Therapy is good. You pay someone who's paid to keep your secrets. They have to go to the grave with those secrets. And talking about what we hold dear that we can't say out loud is helpful in making us and pushing it out of the way so it doesn't become an obstacle for us. And so if that's what you need, get therapy. If you need a kitchen cabinet of advisors, get into a program like DELP, where you're surrounded by energy and affirmation and ideas. Sometimes they just give you ideas on how to get off go. So I just think self-investment is definitely the first thing. Then figure out your path forward and just get started. Isn't that what Michelle Obama said? Just do something. Just do something.
Yeah, sound advice. I tell this story. I like to tell this story now. I was a little bit ashamed of it at first, but I felt that because when it came to starting this podcast, I was really nervous about it. I was nervous because I felt like there were already so many prominent voices in the space. But then I came to the realization that I needed to get over myself and that there is room at the table for all of us because we all have different lived experiences and unique perspectives. And I'm learning and I'm getting there, and it's a journey. And I thank you for that advice for women leaders, because what I am hearing you say is that it's about the journey. Just get started.
It
And
started.
everything else. So, it'll work itself out, and you're gonna trip up sometimes, you're gonna make mistakes. It's not gonna be perfect. Sometimes the journey is messy, but you stay at it. And that is so important.
Remember, you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching, A, who can help you, and B, who can help you. So elevation or just help you be whole. And so I just think that is very, very important. Doing something puts you in rooms, and you never know when you're going to step into the right room and or the room that helps you to get your next step up your ladder. Just do something. You're sharing your fear about getting started with this will help, even though you don't know who it is. Someone will hear that story and say, "That's me." And because she did it, I know I can do it. So that's where we're coming from. Preach.
I love it. I'm telling you, it was a journey. I had to I really had to get over myself and just say, listen, girl, just stop. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you're right. Somebody called me up last week and said, hey, I have this idea, but I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know where to start. How'd you get started? And I said, well, let me just tell you, I was worried about making it perfect. And then finally I said, let me just do it. And wound up just launching it. And
Yeah.
so I hope that it inspires people, because if you have a vision, just know you are not alone in feeling afraid sometimes. But somebody once told me you got to feel the fear and do it anyway. And
Fear is a
yeah,
great motivator. It gets you up every single day. Fear of the lack of a paycheck, whatever motivates you. Fear is a great motivator, and so lean into that fear. It'll take you places.
some of the things that you wish you had known before stepping into leadership roles.
The main thing, I think about this often because I'm asked that question so much now, is that I didn't have to have all the T's crossed and I's dotted. I didn't have to be perfect. I just needed to be authentic. I just needed to bring my whole heart in. I needed to show and evidence what made me unique. There's only one Velma Hart, and I thought she had to be like all the other leaders that I saw. But she doesn't. She can be Velma Hart and be just as successful or even more so than those others that I'm watching. So to be authentic would be what I would think about. And I wish I had not lost time being somebody else or trying to be someone else. It's in the rearview mirror now, but it motivates me in every way, every day that I get up. And so I bring my whole heart and my authentic Velma Hart self to every conversation, every opportunity. My 20 something me, my 30 something me, I thought I had to be a great imitator.
How did you break free of that? Was it a sudden epiphany and one day you just woke up and said, you know what, I'm just going to be me? Or what did you find that was more of a process for you and working through kind of some of what you talked about earlier, that self-discovery and inner work?
There were a lot of moments where I was being inauthentic and I got called out. Remember I said that? You call it out if you see something. But one, I think, and I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story, Johnny Taylor, who is now the CEO of SHRM, and I worked at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. He hired me as his finance director and CFO. Early in my career, because of some missteps, I will call it that, there was a confidence moment that I was experiencing when I started at TMCF. And I was to prepare the budget presentation for the other directors. And my assignment was to present it over the phone. We were on the Zoom call, what the strategy would be for the budget presentation for that year. And I started timidly and mimicking others. And Johnny is the master of learning your people. He taught me that, the value of learning your people. So he knew me. And I think I got maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes into the presentation. And he just said, stop, stop, stop. So, Velma, you're not ready. So we're going to end this call. And all my colleagues were there, all my peers, other senior leaders on the call. We're going to end this call until you figure out what you want to present from Velma. Everybody hang up. This call is over. And that was the that was the moment
Wow.
that I will remember for the rest
Yes.
of my life. And he wasn't
Yeah.
disrespectful. He just said, you're not presenting the way Velma and what Velma Hart would present. And we're not going to waste our time on this call another second hearing you present somebody else's strategy. So that never happened again. And I worked for him for 5, 6 years. It never happened again.
I love it. And thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for people to also hear that someone who is as esteemed as and accomplished as you are has also had those moments in their career where you had to be course corrected a little bit, and that mentorship that helped you along the way.
Wait, you of course corrected. That was still doing. Nobody comes for me like that anymore. Nobody, because of Johnny Taylor. So, I just give him all the credit. Hopefully he'll hear this one day and laugh. But, he just, that was a moment. And it stuck with me. It's been 15 years since we've had that moment. And so it stuck with me.
Yes, that's powerful. Is there any advice that you would give to leaders who are struggling to find their authentic voice? You talked about the inner work and things like that, but when you are in the moment and you are actively leading, how do you take that step back and recalibrate when you realize, my gosh, like I don't really know who I am and it's coming through in my leadership?
That's a great question. Okay. So I would suggest that you arm yourself or acquire a really good friend, because good friends, if they love you right, will tell you when you're off track. They'll tell you when you're faking it. So have yourself a good friend or two in the industry or outside. They don't have to be in the industry that you serve. They just need to love you enough or care about your career and your growth enough to tell you the truth. Have a truth master, whatever that is. Have a truth master.
That is so good. And I have appreciated our time together today. This has been such a rich experience for me talking with you. And I am going to close with asking you about how you balance the demands of leadership and maintain that healthy kind of work-life integration. And what advice would you give to other leaders in that regard?
I got to start with this. I have a tremendous partner, a life partner. Carlton Hart is the wind beneath my wings. And so when my daughters were younger, he played Mr. Mom so that I can go out and achieve. And he never questioned it. He never made me feel bad about not being present. He made it work for me to achieve my goals. And I wonder how much of his goals were compromised for that. But I give him all that honor and praise because he deserves it. So I think I would say the work-life balance is somewhat of a myth. You cannot have it all. Something's going to get compromised. But hopefully you can prioritize enough as you're going through the journey of trying to figure out what the priority is to not let important stuff slip off. Keep the main thing the main thing. Don't overcommit. I was the queen of overcommitting. Everybody would ask me everything and I'd say yes to everything. Learn the power of no. And you'll be okay and you'll figure it out. There's no magic sauce. There's no magic juice. There's nothing that will help you balance your life other than you. And you'll figure it out over time and you'll prioritize the right thing for you. You don't have to imitate anyone. Figure out what works best for you.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Velma Hart, for being with us today. I do want to ask you, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners? Do you have any initiatives going on? I know you mentioned that you are also the CEO of your own organization. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that for those who are listening and have been impacted by what you shared today and maybe they want to reach out? Tell us about how people can get in touch with you.
All right. My consulting firm is Velma Hart and Associates. We're located in National Harbor, Maryland. We can be contacted. My email address there is Velma at vhassociates.org. We do everything that you might imagine and then some. www.vhassociates.org is the website. You can consult it. And if you need me, I would love to help you. You know, the journey may look steep, but once you get started, you find out it's very, very easy. So just get started. And however I can help, I'm here to serve.
Thank you so much for being with us today. All right. Thanks, listeners. And we will be back in 2 weeks with our next episode of Leadership Bites. So stay tuned.